On July 24th, this past year, I stood in a church, and my daughter, with her future husband, she's 22, 23 years old right now, and she just got married this last summer. And I looked up, and you know what I did, guys? In the wedding ceremony, I pulled out day 22 from that journal from when she was 14 years of age. And I read from that sheet some of the things that I remembered she had told me that she was looking for in a future husband, and how I had prayed over that chair for her future mate. And I announced to her and the congregation, that which is faith has become sight. And here standing before us today is Jason, who is the answer to our prayers. You see, guys, one of the things we have to do is we have to reject passivity. There's the inward thrust of the sword, but there's also the forward thrust of the sword, going forward into battle. The forward thrust of the sword. And one of the things about the forward thrust of the sword is that it is there because we have to conquer the strongholds that are in our lives. All men have baggage. And one of the things in men's fraternity that has been so helpful to me and to hundreds of thousands of other men, not just in the United States, but around the world, and I'm talking about China and South America, where there are men's fraternity groups meeting, even today, who are going through ceremonies similar to the ones that we have had here in different cultures. You know why that is? You know why this works in other cultures as well as in the United States? Because there is a common manhood language that is spoken. And in this common manhood language that is spoken, we find out that we all carry a suitcase. Do you remember this from the Quest from Authentic Manhood? That one of the promises was that you would open up your suitcase and you would unpack your suitcase, all that stuff you've been carrying around inside of you. And some of those were things like wounds that you had developed, a father wound because your father may not have loved you or affirmed you, or you've been spending all of your life trying to live up to some expectation. The overly committed or involved mother who, you know, you're still kind of tied to your mother, and there's that kind of wound where you just can't break away. And then there's also this wound called the all-alone wound. I don't know if you remember that one or not. The all-alone wound is where you've been taught that you need to, if you're going to make it, you need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. I'm a man. I don't need anybody else. I got it together. I can do it. We all suffer from the all-alone wound. And I don't know if you remember this scene from the movie Gladiator. Let me just, before I even tell this story, ask, how many of you are familiar with the movie Gladiator? Would you raise your hand so I can see? Because Gladiator is a movie about a Roman general, Maximus Decimus Meridius, who is a general of the armies of the Felix legions in the height of the Roman Empire. And he leads his army out, and he's close to his men. They've got this handshake where they say strength and honor before they go into battle. But after the emperor is assassinated by his son, who becomes the emperor, his son has been trying to prove himself to his dad, but he's not trustworthy. He can't be trusted with the kingdom. So you remember, he assassinates his own father, the emperor of Rome. And at the same time, he has Maximus arrested, and he has him ordered to be killed, but Maximus escapes his executioners. As a result of a turn of events, he is sold as a slave and becomes a gladiator. And he goes into the arena one day, and the gladiators are put out there for sport. In this particular sporting event that's cast before everybody. Do you remember the scene, those of you who saw the movie? The scene is you've got this kind of ragtag army of guys who've been trained as gladiators who are put out in there, and they're restaging the Battle of Carthage, which the Romans won, which, by the way, does not sound good for the gladiators who are out there, because coming out of the chutes are wild animals and guys in chariots who are there to slaughter the gladiators as sport before the people who are watching. Maximus Decimus Meridius says, any of you guys fight in the army? Any of you have experience? Nobody there knows he's a Roman general. But when they get out there, he says, follow my lead and stick with me. And we'll form our ranks in a certain way so that they can't penetrate us with the chariots. Every now and again, you'll see one of the gladiators break off on his own. And every time any one of the gladiators breaks away from the group, what happens is he's killed. Guys, that's a great story for us. It's a great story because when you put forth the sword, when you go with the forward thrust of the sword, you've got to recognize that you can't climb the mountain of manhood disconnected from other men. That's why next year, in year 3, as you have knelt down here and you have made a commitment, it's not only to be here, but it's to make sure that you bring another man along with you in that 3rd year as you go on in men's fraternity. By the way, can I say something to you? You get the entire men's fraternity message in year 1. It's just one message. But in year 2, what happens is we go a little bit deeper into things that were just kind of broad brushed for us in year 1. And in year 3, what's going to happen is you're going to cast a dream, cast a vision. And as you put forward this sword, as you go with the forward thrust in year 3, one of the things that you're going to do is not only are you going to conquer some of those things that have held you back in your life, but what you're going to do is you're going to get a vision for your life. Well, I said there are 3 things that a man needs to know. If he wants to be an authentic man, 3 things he needs to know. He needs to do the inward thrust of the sword. He needs to have the forward thrust of the sword. But he also needs to have the upward thrust of the sword. And the upward thrust of the sword represents celebration. That's what we've come here this morning to do, to celebrate the fact that we've said, it's not enough for me to stay as I am. I want to do more. I want there to be more to my life than what there has been. You know, in here there are some men who are celebrating the fact that you have become connected to another man. A group of men in your discussion time after each session where you spend some time together. I want to ask you to do something as you celebrate. You know, it has been said that when a man shares his burdens with another man, the burden is half. And when he shares his joys and his victories and his celebrations with another man, the joy is doubled. And so here today, what I want you to do is I want you to exchange phone numbers with another man. And from this point forward, at least once a week, to call that other man. Don't leave, but get connected to another man where you call one another once a week and check up on each other on how you're doing on your 10 key moves. Next year, when you get ready and you remember this feeling of exhilaration, when you won at home with your wife and with your children, and you remember that you want somebody else to experience this same thing. Remember that we are in a battle. And we're going to celebrate together. I want to end by telling you a story about a man. It's a true story. And the true story is about a man named Bill Havens. Bill Havens in 1924, the New York Times predicted in 1924 that Bill Havens would win 4 gold medals in the Paris Olympics, competing for the United States in sculling. That's an oarsman. 4 gold medals. He was selected to the U.S. Olympic team. He had trained hard. He was at the peak of his performance level. But as the Olympics grew closer, his wife was pregnant, and he began calculating, after all these months and years of training, he began calculating and playing it out, 1924 now, and realized that there was a good probability, not just possibility, but a probability that his wife would have their first child while he was away at the Olympic Games. So Bill Havens did something unthinkable. He made a hard decision. Because you see, in 1924, you don't get to Paris, France by jumping on an airplane and then get home, in a matter of hours. They traveled by boat as a team. It was a transatlantic trip that they took. And so, there's a week of getting ready and going over and making the trip and settling in, and then, you get acclimated to the climate for several days before the actual events begin. And then the Olympic Games are 3 weeks in length, and then you've got another week, and coming back and re-entering and getting back with your home and your family. So you're looking at 5 or 6 weeks that these athletes would be gone. So Bill Havens went to the USOC, and he told them that his wife was expecting a child, their first child, and that he had made a decision that rather than compete in the Olympic Games, he was going to stay home for the birth of their child, who, by the way, was a son. Now, I wish this was one of those television movies where in 30 minutes or an hour it all ties up real nicely, and in the end we all hear that Bill Havens competes again and he wins those gold medals that he missed out in 1924. But I want to say something to you. Bill Havens was at the peak of his performance in 1924. He never competed for the United States Olympic team and never won a medal. But 28 years later, in 1952, he received a telegram. The telegram was from Helsinki, Finland, the location of the 1952 Olympic Games. Bill Havens began reading the telegram. It was short. This is what it said. Dear Dad, thank you for staying home for my birth. I'm bringing home the gold medal you should have won. Love, your son. Now, guys, I want to tell you something this morning. That's what it means to celebrate. We lift the sword in celebration because, you see, the fact is, not every time that we do something are people going to cheer for us at the moment that we do them. But there are rewards to doing the right thing. I salute you this morning for your completion. But this is not the end of the journey. This is the beginning of a journey. It's a journey that requires us as men, like was said a while ago, to continue doing those stomach crunches. You can tell I'm one who probably needs to do some of those, by the way. Well, you don't get those six-pack abs, by just sitting around and wishing for them. You have to work for them. And you have to stay in shape. I want to thank you for allowing me to come and share this highlight, this moment with you this morning. It's special. And I just want to say to you again, you're a part of a larger army that is marching forward, a mighty army that is making a difference in this world, and it's making a difference. One family, one man, one child, one business place at a time. God bless you, and thank you. Tom?